Welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in the Gospel of John, chapter 21. So we're winding down John's Gospel. And I want to, before I continue, when actually get into chapter 21, there was a statement I want to just kind of rehash before we move on. And it is a statement that gives us some understanding in terms of scripture. Now, this is what I mean. We oftentimes there are people that will ask questions like, why don't we have more information? So for example, well, what was Jesus' life between the age 12 and 30? What did he do? We don't have any information on that. In fact, Luke is the only one that gives us a glimpse when he was 12 years old. Okay? And I think one of the things, let me jump to it here. I think we have to understand that God's purpose in Scripture, okay? God's purpose in Scripture, okay, is not to give a biopic of Jesus' life, a blow by blow, but it's to focus on the things that God felt in His wisdom we needed to know, and that's from Genesis to Revelation. We don't have a blow by blow. That's not what the purpose of Scripture. So I want to kind of just read this verse again back in chapter 22, when it says Jesus performed. Now he's talking about post-resurrection. Now, John is giving his commentary. They're not seeing a lot of Jesus. I think about 3 times maybe after his resurrection. And then it says, so verse 30 says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book. So there are signs out there. There are things about Jesus that's just not written. But look at verse 31, and this is the important part. But these are written so that you may believe Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and by believing you may have life in his name. So whatever is written for the purpose of your faith, to build your faith. So, some people, again, I used to get questions all the time, and I'm sure you get them too, and if not, you will receive them, about why, a lot of the unanswered questions out there. But keep in mind, there literally are billions of unanswered questions. That's not the purpose of Scripture. All right, so chapter 21, verse 1 says, after this, Jesus revealed himself again to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. Now, keep in mind, they're not seeing a lot of Jesus. As I said, I think they might have seen Jesus in a total of 3 times that they have seen him in terms of his post-resurrection, maybe 3 or 4, if you want to count the ascension scene. So he says here, he revealed himself in this way. So verse 2, Simon Peter, Thomas, called twin, Nathanael from Cana of Galilee, Zebedee's sons, that would be James and John, and 2 other of his disciples were together. I am going fishing, Simon Peter said to them. We are coming with you, they told him. And then they went out and got into a boat. But that night they caught nothing. Now, I want to set up the story here because it's very interesting. First and foremost, the idea of them going fishing. Did Jesus tell them to go fishing? I think they were supposed to wait for him. But anyway, so Peter goes, and then these disciples, they go fishing with Jesus. But it seems unusual. They caught nothing, right? It just, in other words, what's going on here? What should have been sort of a routine catch. Um, Verse 4, when daybreak came, Jesus stood on the shore. However, the disciples did not know it was Jesus. Now, again, people may say, well, why didn't they recognize Jesus? Again, we're talking about glorified post-resurrection Jesus. He says, men, Jesus called to them, you don't have any fish, do you? No, they answered. Then he says, cast the net on the right side of the boat. He told them, and you will find some. So they did. Now, I don't know why they did that if they're not recognizing Jesus. That's kind of interesting there. That's just an interesting thought. Like why? Anyway, he said, so they did, and they were unable to haul it in because of the large number of fish. Therefore, the disciple, the one Jesus loved, said to Peter, it is the Lord. So now they're kind of realizing it is the Lord. Like I said, kind of makes me wonder, then why are you obeying a stranger? But anyway, it pays off. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he tied his outer garment around him, for he was stripped, and plunged into the sea. Now, again, to me, strange action. Why? Why did he jump into the sea? Now, the outer garment, of course, when they said that they were, and that's, his inner garment was considered, nakedness, I guess. But anyway, he said, but since they were not far from the land, about 100 yards away, the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish. And when they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish lying on it and bread. So Jesus had already got some fish and was already cooking the fish. Verse 10, bring some of the fish you've just caught, Jesus told them. So Simon Peter got up and hauled the net ashore full of large fish. And then he said 153 of them. So again, large fish, not the little sardine type fish right here. And that even though there were so many, the net was not torn. Come and have breakfast, Jesus told them. None of the disciples dared ask, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. Although they were kind of like, okay, we're going to assume it's you. And Jesus came and took the fish and gave it to them. And he did the same with Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and he did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Now, let's also assume that Jesus is also eating with him. And the reason why I make that point is in this glorified body, this is kind of interesting that it seems to appear we're going to be able to enjoy food. And I'm going to dare say without worrying about calories, without worrying about cholesterol and triglycerides and diabetes and all of that, so forth and so on. Okay. Now, verse 15, and when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter. Now, this is one of the most fascinating stories here. Peter, tradition tells us that Peter never forgave himself for his denial to Jesus' face. He never forgave that. Jesus told him, you're going to deny me. Peter said, not me. And then he denied Jesus to his face. Tradition tells us he never, ever forgave himself. In fact, tradition tells us that when he was martyred, he requested that he would be crucified upside down. Now, when we say tradition, we're talking about stories that could be true or not true. They're not really verified by Scripture. In other words, Scripture never said that. And so oftentimes these traditions They come out of and from kind of oral passing down orally. So anyway, but Peter, now think about this. He's probably now, every time he has seen Jesus, it's like, oh, awkward, right? Awkward. And hoping that this doesn't come up. Well, Peter was wrong. Verse 15, when they had eaten, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Now, the these in context would have to be the fish. Okay? Yes, Lord, he said to him, you know that I love you. Feed my lambs, he told him. Now, a second time he asked him, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Yes, Lord, he said to him, you know I love you. Shepherd my sheep, he told him. And he asked him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved that he asked him a third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know everything. You know I love you. Now, before we get to Jesus, then he says it, feed my sheep. So first he says, feed my lambs, shepherd my sheep, feed my sheep. This becomes sort of the standard too of what pastoring should be directly from the Lord. So he tells him, don't be a showman. Now I'm ad-libbing here because of what we see today, in Christendom. Okay, a lot of showmanship, So he tells the explicit instructions: take care of my people, take care of my lambs. And if you are an elder or a pastor, God is speaking to you. This is what you are to do. You're not, fancy, lavish, whatever. Okay. But I want to kind of come back though, and our English translation, and here's where I'm going to kind of now go to the Greek language. And I don't often go to the Greek language, but here I think it's very, very important because in the English translation, it's not going to bring it out. Now, by the context, by the third time Jesus asked him, Peter is grieved. Okay, that Peter is grieved. He asked him, right? You can almost kind of be like one of these comedic movies. Jesus, and Peter, and Peter like, oh my God, and he's like, and he's like, you can probably think he's probably like, yes, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord. Do you love me? Notice he said, do you love me more than these? So the fact that he's asking this, do you love me? Now, what I want to bring out in the Greek, because there's some word play that is fascinating. The English translation for the word love. The English translation love doesn't do the Greek words for love. And so for the sake of this, there are basically two words. Now, I've told you before there are basically four words that kind of involve around a relationship. And actually there are more Greek words that are translated sometimes into love. And pretty much you can almost say love for anything. I love fishing. That could be a Greek word, right? Love of hobbies, whatever. But for relationships, pretty much four words. One, eros, sexual attraction, and then storge of affection, just kind of natural affection, and then phileo, and this is important, phileo, which is relationship, friendship. Okay, and then there's agape, which is the God kind of love. So whenever you see when God says that he loves us, it is always agape. And so in other words, God is never I phileo you. However, in this exchange, there are two words that are being bantered here: agape and phileo. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read this, and then I want you to hear it now from how the Greek words come out. When they had eaten breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Joseph, do you agape me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said to him, "you know I phileo you." Phileo you. "Feed my lambs," he told him. Now, at least, by the way, let me just kind of pause for a moment. Peter should have been comforted, right? In that he's telling them, "No, you don't, Peter. Get out!" Right? He's still affirming Peter as not only a disciple but a leader. Feed my lambs. Now, remember the agape love is God's love that loves us based upon His value of us, and then phileo is friendship, meaning in other words, what we have in common. And then in reality, Peter could not have answered that question of agape. So he says, and so he throws back phileo. A second time, verse 16, he asks him, "Simon, son of John, do you agape me?" "Yes, Lord," he said to him, "you know I phileo you. Shepherd my sheep," he told him. See the back and forth here? What Jesus is asking him? He's not kind of getting that back. Now, verse 17 says, he asked him a third time. Now, this is interesting. "Simon, son of John, do you phileo me?" And Peter was grieved that he had asked him a third time, "Do you phileo me?" And he said, "Lord, you know everything. You know I phileo you. You know at least that." But actually, Peter, right? Not exactly, right? Not exactly. Because after all, Peter, you did deny him to his face. That's not phileo love. That's not even phileo love. Filio love. Filio. I think it's filio. Okay? So, in other words, Peter demonstrated he didn't even love him the way he is saying that he loved him. And so he was grieved. But at the same time, Peter, did you not demonstrate your lack of love? But as I said, even in this discourse right here, Jesus is affirming Peter. And, it's kind of interesting because we can look at this in a broader sense of sin. How that we are frail. In other words, when Jesus told Peter he was going to deny him, he knew Peter was going to. That's why he was telling Peter, "You're going to deny me." He's telling you, Peter, and Peter in his arrogance, saying, I would never deny you. Okay, but that's kind of an interesting word play that's going on there. "Do you agape me?" "No, I phileo you." And then, do you phileo me? Do you phileo me? Do you really do that? And of course, I said Peter's actions demonstrated he didn't. His actions demonstrated no. And Peter could have answered that. "Well, no, your actions, you've shown me that you don't," right? It would be like a man who cheats on his wife, or a woman, who cheats, commits adultery. "Do you love me?" Now, a person may say, "Yeah, I love you." You're cheating. No, your cheating proves and demonstrates you don't love me. Now, what is interesting is that, no, I won't go there because I'm running out of time, but notice how Peter, in his mind, no doubt was sincere. No doubt. But Jesus also was just in questioning the level of his love. Very interesting wordplay, that's all. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP The Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.